Well, there we go, and we are live. Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. This is Navigating a Hot Sellers Market in Manitoba, a special Facebook Live presentation of the Manitoba Financial Services Agency and MoneySmart Manitoba. We're going to wait just a few seconds as people trickle into the beginning of the event, and we'll see how I see we've already got a few people joining us. And we'll start in just a moment. Okay. Good afternoon once again, and thank you for joining us. This is Navigating a Hot Sellers Market in Manitoba, a special Facebook Live presentation of the Manitoba Financial Services Agency and MoneySmart Manitoba. Joining us today on the right is Chris Besko, Director and General Counsel of the Manitoba Securities Commission, and on the left is Keith Schinkel, Registrar with the Commission's Real Estate Division. Quick bio on our guests today. Chris Besko is a graduate of the University of Manitoba, called to the Manitoba Bar in 1992. After several years of private practice in litigation, Chris joined the MSC in 1998 as assistant counsel. Since 2014, Chris has been the Commission's director and general counsel. He is also a member of several national and international committees on securities law. Keith Schinkel joined MSC's Real Estate Division in 2001. He became Deputy Registrar in 2008 and Registrar in 2017. Keith serves as an active member of the Real Estate Regulators of Canada and several other provincial and national organizations. Thank you both for being here, gentlemen. Now, just to explain to our guests today, the Manitoba Securities Commission is part of the Manitoba Financial Services Agency, a special operating agency of the province of Manitoba that administers and enforces legislation for the province's securities and insurance sectors, real estate and mortgage brokers, credit unions, case populaires, cooperatives, and trust and loan companies. The Commission's Real Estate Division is responsible for administering the Real Estate Brokers Act and the Mortgage Brokers Act. This division registers real estate brokers, salespersons, mortgage brokers, and property managers, monitors brokers' trust accounts, and investigates complaints against real estate brokers, salespersons, and mortgage brokers. That's a mouthful. This leads to our first question today, which is for Chris Besko. How does the Manitoba Securities Commission differ from an organization like the Manitoba Real Estate Association?
Well, as you already mentioned, the Manitoba Securities Commission is a division of the Manitoba Financial Services Agency, which is an SOA, and we're tasked with actually regulating the market. So we register the people that are selling real estate, and we also are involved with any enforcement type activity for people that are not behaving properly within that role. The MREA, as an example, is a member organization that is also active in the industry. It's one of our partners in the industry that helps us in terms of the registration of the agents in being a course provider for us for both the initial registration and also for ongoing learning for the agents. In addition to that, the MREA is also in control of what's referred to as the Manitoba Real Estate Reimbursement Fund, which is a fund that's available for in certain situations where there's been some fraudulent activity involving real estate. However, any payments out of those funds are something that's determined by the Manitoba Securities Commission after a hearing.
Thank you very much. Now, a lot of people have seen in the news lately, there's been a lot of discussion in Manitoba and across Canada about a so-called hot market, often referred to as a seller's market. So what is a seller's market exactly? Keith?
Yeah, so Jason, as you mentioned, the topic of market activity is very popular right now in the public eye. And what we find is if you follow the real estate market over a period of time, what you see is it tends to flow in cycles. So sometimes the market conditions will be favorable to sellers, Sometimes they'll be favorable to buyers, and sometimes it'll be somewhere in between, whereas it doesn't seem to favor one party over the other. When we're talking about a hot or a seller's market, we're talking about market conditions where the market is tending to favor the sellers. This can come about for a variety of different factors, but the one common thing that you seem to see whenever you're through or into a seller's market is that there's more individuals looking to buy properties than there are actually properties that are up for sale. So it's the old story where demand is actually overreaching what the supply is. And when you run into that type of situation, the market, as far as buyers are concerned, becomes very favorable, and that can very competitive, and that can result in, conditions that are favorable for buyers in terms of getting what they want when they're looking to sell their properties, and that's what we're seeing by and large right now.
Now, a multiple offer situation, is that a positive thing or is that a negative thing? Can you explain a little bit more about what that entails?
Okay, well, as Keith was just talking about, when you have what's basically a seller's market, quite often there's a high demand for different properties that are available. And what will often happen is that you'll have multiple offers on the same property, where that's being anticipated by the agent that's listing the property for the seller. What they'll normally do is set up something that's called a multiple offer process. We'll talk a bit more about that in a bit. But basically, it's a means of having multiple offers presented at the same time, and allows the buyer to go through the offers in one sitting, as it were, to determine which offer that they want to pursue, or offers that they may want to get pursue. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing depends on your perspective. Obviously, for a seller, if you have multiple offers coming in on your property, that's a good thing, because it's going to be moving. If there's demand, that means that the price is likely going to be higher at the end of the day. For the purchasers, it's not as good a thing necessarily, because you'll be in a bidding war with other people. You may end up paying more than you want to pay. And depending upon how the market goes, like as again Keith mentioned, it's cyclical. And even when there has been gains in a price in a very hot market, it doesn't mean that a couple of years from now that the market's not going to cool down, and you may not be able to get the same price for that same property. So where it can be a real problem for purchasers, that if they, especially in an environment like this where there's very low mortgage rates, is where you might end up buying more property than you can afford, especially if you've been financing it.
I see. Thank you. Now, let's say I have an agent working for me. I've gone out, I've hired a real estate agent. What do they need to do in a situation like this? What is the protocol?
So as I mentioned before, and Chris also referenced, we see that the market tends to be cyclical in terms of, whether it's a favorable market for sellers or favorable market for buyers. And the last time we were in a cycle like the one we're in now, where it's such a hot market and seller's market, was in 2008. And at that time, the commission worked together with real estate registrants, as well as the Manitoba Real Estate Association, to develop the multiple offer practice directive. And what that directive really is it outlines the protocol or the rules that agents are required to follow when they find themselves in a multiple offer situation, like the one that Chris just referenced a minute or so ago. And really, the aim is to try and ensure that the process is fair for all parties, in particular buyers who may find themselves in the multiple offer situation, which at times, especially in a hot market can be frustrating and sometimes disappointing. So the multiple offer practice directive touches on quite a number of things, and the full copy of it can be seen on our website, and hopefully we can link to that somewhere within the chat function for this session. But there are a few items that I'll touch on that that individuals can expect, or they would expect to happen as a result of the protocol itself. So the first thing is that if a buyer finds themselves in a multiple offer situation, the selling agent is required to advise the buyer that they are in competition with other buyers. This gives the buyer who submitted an offer an opportunity to amend any terms on their offer should they wish to, in view of the fact that now there's more than one offer in play for the seller to consider. In addition to that, if a buyer submitting their offer by way of paper prepared contract, that contract should be submitted in a sealed envelope, with the envelope only to be opened at the time that all the offers are to be presented to the seller. This measure is really intended to ensure that the details of that buyer's offer are confidential, and they can't be used in any way as a negotiating ploy, or you can't have buyers playing off each other, or can't have buyers being played off each other with the terms of their specific contract being revealed to other potential buyers. Also, then a very important aspect of this is that under the multiple offer practice directive, agents representing sellers are not entitled to reveal the contents or terms of other offers to other buyers. And this kind of speaks to what I just mentioned a minute ago. And the intent behind that is that it's to ensure that sellers agents aren't driving the process, or manipulating or having an effect on the process in such a way that it may increase the selling price or other respective terms in the contract. So those are a few of the key aspects that are outlined in the practice directive. And as I mentioned, hopefully we can include a link to that so that if people watching this are interested, they can view the full details of the directive on our website.
Excellent. Okay. Now, with that discussion of what agents should be doing, what should I do if the agent I'm working with isn't following that protocol, or if there's something I have a concern about? Oh, Chris, I think you're
I'm back.
got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes, if you do have a concern about an agent's activities in a multiple offer or any other situation, really, you can make a complaint to the Securities Commission about that agent behavior. The easiest way to do it is through our website. We actually have an online complaint form that you can fill out, or contact our office and you'll be referred to one of our investigators. If after the course, if you do make a complaint, you will be contacted by one of the investigators who will try to get some further information from you about the nature of your complaint, and also whether we can help you on the complaint. There are certain things that we can't really help on, which might just be a contractual dispute on an offer. But what we look at more specifically is at the actions of the agents and how they have been dealing with the clients in the situation. If an agent is found to have violated our legislation, they can be suspended after a hearing before the commission. In addition to that, if there is somebody that's lost money as a result of what we refer to as a fraudulent act in real estate, and there's a number of different ways that could happen. In that situation, there is the reimbursement fund that can be, a claim can be made against the reimbursement fund by way of a commission hearing on the complaint.
Excellent. Okay. Just to let you fellows know, we're getting some really good questions today in the comments. We really appreciate those comments coming in. I've just posted a link to the Manitoba Securities Commission's real estate website on how to file a real estate complaint. So you can grab that link on the event page here, and we'll add that to the video when we post it again later today for those who couldn't join us live. Now, my next question is something I've read a little bit about online where there seems to be some confusion is what is called a clean offer. Does a clean offer pose any risk to me as a consumer?
Yeah, so I'll touch on that one, Jason. When a buyer is preparing an offer that they're going to submit to a seller, they can include various terms or conditions in the contract that would be to their benefit. So for example, in the standard form of offer that all real estate registrants are required to use in the purchase of a residential property, a buyer can request that the seller provide a property disclosure statement, or they can make their offer conditional to the buyer being able to arrange suitable home financing or a mortgage by a specific date. And including these types of conditions can introduce an aspect of protection for the buyer in the transaction. When we're talking about a clean offer, we're referring to an offer that doesn't include any conditions whatsoever. So there's no condition that makes the purchase subject to the buyer being able to arrange mortgage or any other terms that might protect the buyer's interests. So preparing or submitting a clean offer can introduce some risk into a transaction for a buyer. So going back to the example of a condition regarding being able to arrange for mortgage financing, if you had a buyer who actually required a mortgage to be able to purchase a property, but they didn't include a condition in their offer so that the offer was subject to them being able to arrange for mortgage financing by a specific date. If it turns out that their offer was accepted and in the end they weren't able to arrange a mortgage, then that buyer would still be required to go through with the purchase of the property, even if they weren't able to arrange mortgage financing. So we would always encourage buyers to consider what it is that they're getting into if they're going to be submitting an offer without any conditions that may be to their benefit.
Okay, thank you. Now, something else that's come up in some media discussion lately is the value of what's called a property disclosure statement. Can you explain a little bit about what a property disclosure statement is, and is it considered a legal document?
Okay, well, I'll try to take that one. So a property disclosure statement is a statement that can be included in an offer to purchase that an agent would use in the sale of residential property. The buyer can request it be part of the offer, and if it is provided at the seller has to agree to provide the property disclosure statement. And basically what it is it's a series of representations about the property that's within the seller's knowledge. It's done as a series of questions that are set out in the statement, and it could include stuff such as disclosure about whether there's been water damage in the basement previously, whether the property has been used for, as an example, as a grow-op in the past, a marijuana grow-op. So there's a number of different questions. Now, each of those statements, has to be signed off on by the seller, and they are representations because these are statements that are being made to the best of the seller's knowledge. So especially if you have a seller who's not been with the property for a long period of time, so say somebody that had purchased the house possibly just to resell it right away, they may not have the knowledge of all the statements on the property disclosure statement, in which case, they may offer to give you one, but it'll be limited in time as to when they actually had the house.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's used at the end of the day is that if a buyer finds out that something has happened with the property in the past, which is contrary to what was stated in the property disclosure statement. So as an example, if the buyer finds that there's a leak in their foundation, and they take off the drywall from the basement wall and find piles of mold and stuff like that, suggesting that it may have existed previously, they may try to use this as a means of going after the seller to seek damages for repairing that deficiency. So if the seller made a representation saying that there had not been any foundation damage or leakage in the past, that property disclosure statement could then be used as evidence in court as to what the seller has said it to be the case. And if it's a false representation, then that is a foundation for getting damages in that situation. So it's a real benefit to a purchaser to request a statement, property disclosure statement, and then it's up to the buyer to actually provide one. These are becoming obviously less common in the multiple offer situations where you have a number of competing offers. The seller is less likely to be looking at an offer where they're requesting a property disclosure statement from them.
Now, here's another question. Let's say I'm the seller. I'm selling my home. I might want a multiple offer situation. As you mentioned, I can potentially get a higher value for my property. Now, can I tell my agent, can I instruct my agent to list my home at a lower price to entice a lot of interest in the property?
So the process, or what you just described, Jason, would commonly be known in the industry as under listing. I guess the short answer to that is, while a seller could instruct their agent to do so, under our legislation, if the agent were to do that, it would be considered a violation of our act. So agents can't engage in the process of underlisting. And a bit of background on that. When agents are preparing listings for sellers, typically they'll do a comparative analysis of other properties that are similar to the one that they're looking to list for sale. So properties that are in the same neighborhood, maybe of the same age, similar size, and they have similar other qualities. And based upon the comparables, the listing agent will come up with a suggested list price. So if there's 5 homes in the neighborhood that sold recently and the average sale price was of those, similar properties was around $350,000, then that would suggest that the listing price for the home they're looking to put on the market would be $350,000. As I mentioned before, under the legislation, if a listing agent would take that same property that's comparable to all the other ones that were listed for $350,000 and list it for $300,000, that would be a violation of the act, and that agent could be subject to discipline. And the intent behind that requirement is that, by underlisting a property, you're deceiving buyers as to what the potential value of that property is, and as well as bringing buyers into the process who perhaps don't qualify to purchase the property at the price that the seller would actually be willing to accept for it.
That's a good point. That's a good point. So I can't just say advertise my house for $1 and then hope I'll get 1,000 people all clamoring over themselves to bid on that.
So I guess if you wanted to, as the seller, you could ask your agent to do that, but your agent couldn't actually go ahead and do it.
Oh, okay, okay. Now, we touched on this a little bit before, but I mean, if I had any concerns or issues with a real estate transaction, whether I was the buyer or seller, who would I contact?
So, yeah, as I mentioned before, who you'd want to contact is us, the commission. You can reach us through our website or by way of phone. And we do have an online complaint form that you can provide the details of your complaint, which we then would review, and then one of our investigators would contact you to get any follow-up information on the complaint.
Excellent. Okay. We're just coming up on 12:25. If you're just joining us, this is Navigating a Hot Sellers Market in Manitoba, a special presentation of MoneySmart Manitoba. We're going to be answering some of your questions now. And if you have a question, just type it in the chat and we'll get to as many as we have time for today. And we're going to give priority to consumer related questions. So if anyone is joining us today and is an agent themselves, we're going to try and talk to the public first and answer any questions they have. Now, the first question I have today is a pretty basic one. It says, "How do I go about picking a realtor, and what kind of questions should I ask them?"
So I can touch on that one. I
Sure.
think one of the first steps that we always encourage consumers to do, whether regardless of um, the financial area that they're looking at, is first of all, if you're looking at the list or if you have a list of some potential agents, you want to first of all make sure that they're actually registered with our office. So we have a tool on our website where members of the public can type in the name or type in a brokerage name of a prospective agent to make sure that they're registered with us. Because as we mentioned earlier in the chat, if you are a person who's going to be helping someone buy or sell a home needs to be registered with our office. Um, and then beyond that, there's a few different things. I mean, obviously, speaking to the agent to get a feeling of if you feel that that person will be a good match or not is always a good idea. If you're talking to the agent, you may want to ask them questions such as, do they uh, do they specialize in particular areas of the city? Do they specialize or have experience in purchasing different type of properties? Because if you're looking to purchase a condominium, that's a different type of transaction as if you're looking to purchase a residential resale home, or if you're looking to purchase an actual home that's being built by a builder. So I'm getting an idea if that person has experience handling the type of transaction that you are interested in engaging in. And then also, word of mouth is always a good way too, if you can ask around and do a bit of searching to see if you can get any positive reviews from other people who may have used that agent in the past, are all are good steps that you can take.
I was just going to add one further thing is also on our website, we list all of our enforcement decisions that we have against people in the industry. So in addition to seeing if they are registered, you can also search to find out if there's been any previous enforcement history for the person for which they've been disciplined.
Chris, just to clarify, members of the public may not entirely understand that. When you say
Sure.
enforcement actions taken against them, what do you mean?
So if we received a complaint or about a specific agent, and then after going through reviewing the complaint, we would normally go to what's referred to as a hearing before the commission, which is similar to sort of a court proceeding. And the commission can then decide whether the agent has acted contrary to the public interest or acted contrary to the provisions in the act. And where they have done so, there will be an order made concerning that particular agent. And those can be found on our website.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. We have another question from the public today. This one's, I guess, a little bit more complicated. So the question is the blind offer process a legal requirement, or can other systems be used in Manitoba? For example, an auction or some other type of disclosure of bids as they come in?
I was going to let Keith take that one, I think.
Sure. So I can touch on that one. Um, so the multiple offer practice directive that we referred to before and that I mentioned requires that the contents of offers be kept confidential, would come into play whenever the situation set up in the way that we described before. So if an agent is advertising a home for sale and offers are being accepted on a certain specific date and there's multiple offers received, then under that circumstance, the contents of all the different offers that are being handled by a real estate registrant need to be kept confidential. And that's what we refer to often as the blind bidding process. Having said that, a seller in Manitoba could opt to sell their home via an auction if they chose to do so. And an auctioneer could be used for that process as long as the auctioneer is simply engaging or running the auction, so simply taking bids, but is not involved in anything else in the process, such as writing the actual contract for the purchase of sale, or handling deposit monies or deposit that might be given for the purchase of that property. So those types of options are available to sellers if they decide to do so. But in the process that we talked about today, in terms of multiple offers, the contents of all the offers need to be kept confidential.
And just to expand on the auction, quite often the auction process is being used. If it's being used for selling residential real estate, it's usually as a result of either a tax sale where somebody hasn't been paying their taxes over a number of years, or else on a foreclosure of a property where a bank is doing a sale of the property.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Again, it's a great question, and I hope that answers that for that gentleman. Our next question, once bids are opened, does the seller contact those in the running to ask if they want to change their offer?
So I can handle that one too, and if Chris wants
Sure.
to touch in, he can. So that's something that's covered in the multiple offer practice directive, and what's outlined in there is that once all the bids have been offered or opened, the seller has a number of different options in terms of how they want to handle that process. So they can decide that if they've received 5 offers, they could decide right away that one of the offers is the one that's preferable to them and just decide that they are going to accept that one and then reject the other 4 offers, under which circumstances that they can or they would be required to advise all the parties involved of what the outcome of that is. But upon opening the offers, if the seller wishes, they could go back to the buyers or some buyers and ask if the buyers wanted to consider changing any terms of their offers in consideration of the fact that there are multiple offers. Having said that, there has to be a lot of caution by the agents involved in that process and how they're going to handle that type of communication. And because, as I mentioned before, the contents of the offers, the other offers that have been submitted, are confidential. So the agent representing the seller can't contact other buyers and make comments such as, well, you know, if your buyer raises the price by $20,000, then the house is yours, or you're in second place, do you want to increase the price of your offer, or you're within $15,000 of the top bid, if you bring it up a little bit, it's yours. All of those types of communications would be not allowed under the multiple offer practice directive. But if they simply wanted to contact other buyer's agents and say, we have multiple offers, would you like to amend anything in your offer, that type of thing is allowed.
Okay. You know, we're getting a lot of great questions here, so we'll move right along. Our next question, and this is a bit of a loaded question. You may not be able to comment on this, but the question is, any idea when the market will change from a seller's to a buyer's market?
I'll take a shot at that. No idea.
Get out your crystal ball.
Yeah, we have no idea, and because there's frankly, I know I am shocked, and I think a number of people are shocked that the market developed the way that it did during the course of the pandemic into such a seller's market. So there's not really any way of knowing when it's going to swing. It will at some point in time. It is cyclical. It goes from one side to the other. I think one of the big motivators for the market right now is the mortgaging, with basically very low mortgage rates compared to what we've had historically. And I think that once the mortgage rates start moving up, that's probably what's going to be cooling the market. We know right now that there are actually attempts by the OSFI, the Office of Financial Superintendent in Ottawa, to try and cool the market down a bit by having what they refer to as the mortgage stress test, which traditionally, when you were going to buy a house, you would just qualify on the basis of the terms that were being offered for the mortgage. So if you're getting a variable rate mortgage at like 2%, that's all that you'd have to qualify for. Under the mortgage stress test, the idea is that they're not, if you're buying a property and you're not getting an insured mortgage, so that means that you're using more than 20% of or you're able to put down a deposit of at least 20% of the selling price, you have to meet certain requirements, not just to meet the actual requirements of the mortgage, but you should be able to meet the requirements if the mortgage was at a rate that was higher than the current mortgage amount. That's about to be changed. As of June 1st, they're changing the criteria on the stress test. So when a bank is looking at you to decide whether to give you a mortgage, they're not looking at it just as what the terms of the mortgage are. They're looking at it by having to increase it, taking into account that if the mortgage rates increase by at least 2%, or we're up to a rate of 5%, whether you could still afford that mortgage. So even though you may be able to afford the mortgage now at the current rate, they have to also assess whether you'll be able to afford it at a higher rate of payment. Because that's where people get into trouble in a market like this. When I mentioned earlier about not being able to afford the house that you're buying, it's where people have basically overextended themselves in financing, and then where prices start falling again and mortgage rates go up, you're going to be stuck paying at a higher mortgage rate than you initially anticipated, which could be a problem for some people.
That's great, Chris. Thank you. And actually, that provides a lot of good information on what a mortgage stress test is as well, which is something people should factor into their home buying plans. We have time for a few more questions. And again, some great questions here today. Next one is, I was asked to provide approval of financing before submitting an offer. Is that standard practice?
I'm not sure if it's standard practice. It is not unusual to have that in a situation like this, where you have a hot market. When we were talking earlier about the concept of a clean offer, when you have multiple offers that are coming in, the ones that are going to get the most immediate attention are the clean ones, or the ones where it's known that there's actual approval for the financing. So it is not uncommon, especially for if an agent's going to be writing up an offer for you, for them to want to know whether you have approval for the financing. Not everybody does that, gets the pre-approval ahead of time. And then, especially if you get caught up in the bidding war, that's when you've made an offer at maybe a higher amount than you wanted to pay. And then you go to the bank after the fact to find out if you have the financing. That can be a problem for you. So most sellers in this type of market would probably not even look at an offer if they didn't know that there was a pre-approval on the financing.
Thanks, Chris. We have a few more questions. Next question is, in a multiple offer situation where the sale price exceeds listing or comps, does CMHC use market value or the sale price?
I don't know. You'd have to actually ask CMHC on that.
Okay. You know what? If our experts don't have an answer for that, I can actually just let everyone know that if you have a question we don't get to today or don't have an immediate answer, we are going to be following up on some of these questions after the live event today. So just hold those questions and we'll try and get to them as soon as we can. Next question. If you are pre-approved by a financial institution, do you need to include that as a condition on the offer?
It would not be a condition on the offer. The condition on the offer is that you're obtaining financing. You would probably want to indicate on the offer somewhere that you know that you are pre-approved, but it wouldn't be considered a condition.
Okay. Next question, is there an opportunity to change your offer at any point? And I think we touched on that a little bit.
Yeah, until such time as the offers get opened, you can always try to change your offer. If it's going through the multiple offer protocol that Keith was talking about earlier, however, where basically the offers have been submitted by way of envelope to the selling agent, you'd have to be able to get your offer back, amend it, and then get it back in, kind of thing.
Okay. Next question. This is a little bit of a longer question with an example. It says, would the selling agent need to disclose what method they will use upon opening the bids? For example, Keith mentioned that the seller has options once opened. Will the selling agent disclose their method prior to buying agent submitting their offer? Basically, as a buyer, I would want to know if I need to go all in the first offer, or if there's an opportunity to change it before the seller selects it says here, the winner or the successful bid.
I can touch on that one. So under the multiple offer practice directive that we talked about, it doesn't outline any requirement for a selling agent to state in advance how offers are going to be handled. So they don't need to include that in the listing, and they don't need to advise other buyers as well in terms of how they're going to handle the process and whether that'll be if they're going to actually go back to buyers and give them the option to increase their bids, or give them the option to change other factors of their offer or not. So that's not a requirement of practice directive. And I think how that's going to play out often is pretty dependent upon what the offers received are and what the specific circumstances are. So it might be difficult for an agent to say in advance what process they're going to follow. I mean, the example that I used before, if you received 5 offers and one offer was the one out of the 5 was the one that by and far satisfied everything that the seller was going to look for, they might just accept that offer based on what they received. And it would be hard for the agent in advance to say, well, and regardless of what we get, we're going to go back to everybody and give them a chance to change their offer. So yeah, there's nothing in the practice directive that would require that. And like I said, I think it probably just depends on what the circumstances are when the offers are received.
And I was going to mention too, it's really up to the seller to decide which offer that they want to accept or whether they want to go back. And so I wouldn't anticipate that any seller would telegraph to you whether you can not go all in to start with. Like, that's not in their interest to telegraph that.
I think we'll have time for one more question, and then we'll wrap up for the day. I should just add, if you have a question that we didn't get to today, please post it on the video page here, and we'll respond to it as soon as we're able. The last question of the day. There's been a lot of talk in media about marijuana grow ops in houses around Winnipeg and in Manitoba. We touched on this a little bit earlier. Um, does the seller of a home need to indicate uh, if you're buying a place? So, for example, if I'm buying a house, does the seller need to tell me that it was a marijuana grow op?
I'm totally leaving that one to Keith to answer.
I was going to leave that one to Chris to answer. So
Oh, there you go. Do we have any thoughts on that? It is a little bit of a complicated question.
Well, I guess the thing is that if I'm a purchaser and I ask a buyer specifically, or ask the seller specifically, was this property a grow op previously? And the seller knows that it was a grow op, and they say, no, it's not. They've just made a false representation. So if I were writing into the condition of the offer that there be disclosure about whether it's been a grow op previously, and the buyer either refuses to answer, in which case they're not meeting the conditions of my offer, or if the buyer gives a false answer, then the buyer, or the seller rather, if it gives a false answer, they would be potentially liable to be sued at the end of the day. So that's why it's something that's actually included in the property disclosure statement. Now, having said that, whatever the seller says has to be within their knowledge. So if the property was a grow op 20 years ago, but they weren't aware of that themselves, would they have to disclose that? No, they don't, because there's not really a way for them to know that. So there's at the end of the day, it's really up to the purchaser to try and ask those questions as part of their process, either when they're going to view the house or through their agent to ask those questions, because unless they ask it, it's not something that the seller has to volunteer. Keith, is there anything you want to add to that, Keith? Or
no, I think you covered it quite well.
And I mean, that's good advice in general. Just it doesn't hurt to ask questions, right? I mean, for most people, this is going to be the largest purchase they may ever make. It's all the more reason to do due diligence and ask a lot of questions. And speaking of questions, we appreciate all your excellent questions here today. If you have a question that we did not get to, you're welcome to post it in the video. I think we have a couple of items here that we will try and follow up on as soon as possible and get a little bit more information for you. And I just want to wrap up today by saying, Chris and Keith, thank you so much for joining us today. This is a really great session.
oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
This has been Navigating a Hot Sellers Market in Manitoba, a special presentation by MoneySmart Manitoba. And if you enjoyed this presentation, please tune in on Tuesday, June 15th for our next Facebook Live event, which will be Senior Financial Abuse Detection, Prevention, and Resolution, held in recognition of June's Seniors Month. And for more interesting and unbiased information on real estate, investing, and other financial topics updated on a regular basis, visit us at moneysmartmanitoba.ca. And once again, thank you for tuning in this afternoon. Have a great day.